So here we begin. Greetings of the day to all the participants today. My name is Preeti Baligar, and I welcome you to the flipped IRSPBL 2021 series of the webinar. I will be moderating this session titled PBL Implementation, Its Advantages and Disadvantages, which is being addressed by originally 3 papers of 3 to 4 minutes each. But we have with us just 2 papers today. So to begin with, as you already are aware, PBL has been gaining momentum all over the world and being implemented in different formats and models in different disciplines and with different purposes and intentions. Having this in mind, this session addresses the advantages and disadvantages when implementing PBL. The 2 papers that we present here today report on how PBL supports the fulfillment of different educational purposes, namely students' empowerment, engineering attractiveness, and women recruitment and interdisciplinarity. Please note, we will first have the presentations one after the other, and then we will move to the panel discussion at the end. During the panel discussion, the participants will have an opportunity to ask questions and open up discussions with the presenters. So to begin with, let us start with the first presenter, and then we shall take the rest later. The first presentation is titled The Jigsaw Classroom, Opportunity, Gap, and Women in the Energy Infrastructure Workflows, and is being presented by Jonathan Montoya from the University of California, United States. I guess Mike and Jonathan is going live. Yes. So here we are with the first presenter. I request the participants to please write down the questions so that we can raise them during panel discussion. Over to the first presenter. Welcome.
Hi, and thanks for joining. I really had to force myself to keep this to 3 to 4 minutes. So it's going to be very brief, but I will drop a link to the ResearchGate paper in the chat if anyone wants to explore it a little further. So, so my paper is Opportunity Gap in Women in the Energy Infrastructure Workforce. And my co-authors are Forrest Peterson from Stanford University and Sade Bonilla from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, both from the United States. And our case study looks at an education platform that's called Workforce VDC, and that's out of the Center for Integrated Facilities Engineering at Stanford. And we work closely with Renate Fruchter in the PBL Learning Lab. So the main message of this paper was really first identifying an issue that we saw in our STEM and CTE pathways, which are science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and career and technical education pathways. And that we saw kind of a general lack of female inclusion in the pathways themselves. Not when we entered post-secondary, like civil engineering, undergraduate is pretty balanced in our area, but the pathways to that are not balanced. So the main message of this paper is how can we successfully increase female participation in the STEM CTE pathways? So what were the main contributions that we came up with? Well, we found evidence that targeted recruiting of a feminist positive pathway had positive results. So what does that mean? So we intentionally recruited as many females or those that identified as female as mentors, lecturers, instructors, students, and we created kind of over recruitment of female participants in all aspects. So we saw a lot of positive results from that, and we're looking forward to really taking it further and seeing what we can do to increase female participation from students in our region to send them onto the post-secondary PBL world. Some of the kind of questions I wanted to pose are around general PBL in terms of job readiness, whether that's in graduate school or as a practitioner, and also just questions around toxic masculinity within the workplace, more from an international perspective, if anyone has any insights on that. But I think that is my time, so I'll stop there. There are some papers I referenced.
All right. So Jonathan, that's the end of your presentation, right?
Yeah.
All right. Yes, thank you so much for it. We will take the questions for this presentation at the end of the next presentation during the panel discussion. In the meantime, please write down your questions that you have so that we can raise them subsequently. The second presenter today is from Hamburg, Germany. The presentation is titled An Interdisciplinary Biotechnology Project, Experiences with a Change to PBL, and is being presented by Bettina Knapp from Hamburg University of Applied Sciences, Germany. So I guess you are also going live. Over to you, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you for your introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to invite you to a short view on a change process from an interdisciplinary learning setting to a PBL learning setting as a voluntary module in the first semester of the bachelor program in biotechnology. So far, lecturers at the Hamburg University of Applied Sciences do not have any experience in PBL teaching as you have at Aalborg. First, we have a look at the change process. This slide shows how our project was evolved in 3 phases. From an interdisciplinary learning setting on the left,
Bettina,
PBL setting
deine
on the
Folien
right.
fehlen.
Sorry?
Deine Folien sind nicht da.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Will you be sharing your screen?
Yes. Please excuse my mistake.
No, please go ahead. It's really fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So, this slide shows how our project was evolved in 3 phases from an interdisciplinary...
Bettina, I'm sorry for interrupting you. Do you want to restart so we can reconnect with the entire presentation from the starting and
yes.
probably also run it in a yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Perfect. Perfect.
So, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to invite you to a short view to a change process from an interdisciplinary learning setting to a PBL learning setting as a voluntary module in the first semester of the bachelor program in biotechnology. So far, lecturers at the University of Applied Sciences do not have any experience in project-based teaching. First, we have a look at the change process. This slide shows how our project was evolved in 3 phases, from an interdisciplinary learning setting on the left to an improved PBL setting on the right. Below, we have a timeline starting in 2010 until now. In the beginning, 9 highly motivated colleagues, blue characters, met to improve the Bologna process and started BIP. BIP means biotechnology as an interdisciplinary project. We gave lecture in a classical teaching format towards our students, yellow characters. And we had some elements of team teaching. But problems occurred in this setting due to only 2 teaching hours for all lecturers, which didn't reflect the time worked into the project. And second, we had reflection and differences of opinion concerning teaching methods and concerning the attitude towards students. And the result, we had disbanding the team. A new setting was created, circle in the middle, with new colleagues and with 4 groups of 4 students. We had to find simple cases which forced students to deal with basic techniques to solve the challenge. For example, the students had to work on the protein content in foods. Tutors, red characters, supported students during the group building process as well as during the search and lab work. Lecturers gave their expertise. For example, the physician explained the optic of the photometer, the chemist explained the biorate reaction, the mathematician helped the students to deal data for statistical analysis, and the computer scientist how to create figures in Excel. Students had to give 2 presentations at midterm and at the final meeting. This PBL learning setting was improved in terms of number and of date of presentations to force the students to start directly and earlier establishing a work plan. The question mark on the right side means that the learning setting is not completed. We continue to develop it and we are curious ourselves where the project is going. In 2016, 17 and 20, the students were systematically asked for their feedback on BIP. And in addition to the oral feedback at the end of the term, a structured questionnaire was used. If you like, we could have a short look on it during the discussion. Now I would like to point out the challenges and perspectives. The main challenge remains the reliability in the team of students. Second, to reduce the dropout rate of the module, not of the program. The dropout rate of the module is about 10%. And the challenge is to find new colleagues who are really interested in project-based learning. Concerning perspectives, we could imagine to extend the PBL concept to other engineering study programs and to write the topics in terms of suitable cases adapted for first-year students. Furthermore, our project may act as a small nucleus for an interdisciplinary curriculum development of the first year of engineering programs. I thank you for your attention and I hope you get a bit of inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bettina. Now we move to the panel discussion. We begin with the first presenter, that is Jonathan Montaya. We are now ready to take questions from the participants. I suggest that instead of typing it in, it'll really help if you can, let us know the questions verbally. It's much more interactive and promotes rich discussions. So Dr. Guerra, you have a question. Could you please read it out to us?
Yes, thank you very much, Jonathan, for your presentation. And this is actually about the attractiveness of female and even other minority groups to engineering. So I think this is actually very interesting. And actually, one of my questions is precisely related to that. If you actually have an idea, what are the causes that leads to this lack of attractiveness or lack of recruitment or low recruitment in terms of females for engineering, specifically at the energy field? So that's one question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we saw, our for this paper, it was ethnography. I'm just looking at some of the other questions, but we do have other quantitative data in other papers that we've written. But for this one, we were just exploring through ethnography. And what we found as some of the barriers were really just a lack of knowledge of what courses were needed to then move on to an engineering pathway, for example. So in one of the courses that I taught when I was a secondary instructor, I had only 3% of those students identify as female. But then when I walk into a civil engineering class, an undergraduate course at Stanford, it's 53% female. So they're coming from somewhere, just not from our region, because 3% means just one student per class. But when we started advertising the pathway, then we started to see more females coming in. So to answer your question more succinctly, it has to do with the general awareness, but also with administrators placing students into courses. They do it, it's actually a person that moves students in and out of courses. It's not an algorithm or anything like that. So.
Thank you. Really interesting, yeah. So, but as I understood, sorry, just a quick follow-up, Betty. But as I understood, this is actually before they get into the university. So it's yeah.
Yeah, so these courses would make them more attractive to be accepted to university as an engineering student.
Very interesting, right. Dr. Guerra, any follow-up questions?
Yes, I actually, now because you have a, sorry, but you have you mentioned the male toxicity, and I found that quite interesting in the sense, not male toxicity, but rather actually prejudice on the administration side when they actually place the people or the women. So I don't know if you have any plans to actually follow up, because now my assumption or my hypothesis would be that maybe this is a domino effect. Someone lacks awareness or has a prejudice that women might prefer this and that, or it's better for them of this and that. And then they might do that choice to a certain extent for them, right? So yeah, so that's just one of my comment as a follow-up, just based on you said. So I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So there are people that actually, so students in our district get to pick their classes. However, they have a list of their top choices, and then an actual person will move them in and out of a course. So I went to the training, you know, just because I wanted to know how do they become trained in moving students in and out of courses. And it literally came down to just an opinion. So one remedy that we saw was if we could bring in the people that place students as mentors or have them see our project-based learning presentations, then we can start to shift the conversation as what is it that is engineering and who belongs in these places. And yeah, so it's going to take a lot of work in our region. And from interviews with students in both undergrad and graduate, the toxic masculinity has definitely come out in our region as something that we need to deal with.
Yes, I really hope that you make more inroads and have more female participation in your construction workforce. We have the second question from Kherwal Leisenberg. Do you want to read the question out, sir?
Yeah, I had the idea that you may have used some data to verify what's really the impact, and was curious about, because that's always a very difficult question for us to, how to really nail it down, that the effect is caused by what we think that it caused it. So would be very interesting to give you some insight if you have used some data for that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And so we have another paper where we used more quantitative data, but the numbers are so few that you could really sneeze at this, you know, if I was to run a model on it, and it's just not a reliable data set. So the ethnography is more accurate in portraying what we're seeing. However, I think it would be beneficial to use larger data sets. And our last author, Sade, she's a educational economist, and she has a lot of work on larger data sets, but then we run into a lot of confounding variables. So we were kind of just isolated on case study, more exploratory. Yeah, really good question.
Yes, we understand this. Do you have any follow-up questions, sir?
Yeah, the follow-up question would be, Are you also part of the larger seismic project? Do you know about that?
No, I don't.
That comes from University of Michigan. I just posted to the chat, and I think that could be extremely interesting for you because they're really gathering a lot of US universities now together and really doing quantitative analysis. And what is especially interesting about the PBL thing is that they found a clear gender gap with classical courses that is getting smaller and smaller the more you move to lab-like and PBL-like course formats. So that could also be an extra thing that it's kind of provable that that gender gap gets smaller if you move to these as advertising or so. And there's really a lot of universities and they have a lot of data what they collect. Maybe that's interesting for you.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll definitely look into that.
Thank you for the link. It's probably helpful for most of us to go through that. I have a couple of questions as well, if you permit. The first one is, you said that you're trying to bring in female participation in the pipeline to your construction workforce. Now, the question here is, how does your intervention fit in the school curriculum?
That's a really good question. So it doesn't. And Patina kind of mentioned more of an interdisciplinary curriculum for her project-based learning. And that is what we need to implement, is more of an interdisciplinary cohort-based curriculum. And we have another paper that explores the cohort model that we created, but it does not fit into the mainstream curriculum at all. We need to reimagine how we do secondary education in our region. So,
all right.
Yeah, hopefully it would disrupt what's currently happening.
The reason I'm asking this question is that back in India, we have a number of programs which are after school, which students take, and it's just optional. So not many students have an opportunity to be a part of this. They are mostly entitled in many cases. But there are also non-governmental organizations which are doing this. But I was really interested in the way you have portrayed it. And I was wondering if there's something which we can do to fit everything as a part of school curriculum and reach out to the mass of students instead of a few niche groups here and there. But yes, it's really great. Thank you. And another question that I have here is, what do men feel about the increasing participation of women in the construction workforce? Have you got a chance to talk to them about it?
That's a really good question. And we had that discussion. And we felt like the male voice is always dominant, and we didn't really want to center that voice anymore. I don't think it needs to be centered. But yeah, it's a really good question. But we did interview lots of people that identified as female, and we asked how they perceived themselves and their acceptance within these fields. And we got a lot of really good data around that. And some of the stuff we heard was troubling. As most of you know, in engineering fields, especially if you're female, you know what it's like to be there. So we've heard a lot of that. Okay. But no, sorry to no, we didn't really privilege the male voice.
Okay, all right. Yes, thank you so much. Shall we now move to the second author, if all the participants permit? All right. We now Bettina Nab. We now have with us Bettina Nab, who's here to take your questions. Yes, Dr. Guerra, do you want to first read out your question? We can start with yours because you've already posted it.
Yes, I was writing as I was listening.
Yeah, I get it.
But you talked about one of the challenges you mentioned was actually two challenges. That was the reliability of the team. So one of the points is actually, if you could elaborate that, what does it mean for in terms of what is the reliability here? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for your question. I mean reliability in terms of disbanding the student teams. Each term we observe repeatedly problems inside some teams which disband due to different reasons. Sometimes students are changing the program. Sometimes they get aware of what is biotechnology, what means working in this area. And in summary, we have the impression that our project is working like a catalysator. Yes, that means students who are highly motivated and quite intelligent adhere more to the program, whereas other students who are perhaps a little bit, skeptical, get more skeptical in terms of, oh, there's really work to do. I really have an engineering program here, and now I don't get it. I can't manage it. And that means that some teams disband, and the stability of the team is important for the resting students, and that is quite different, and it's difficult to lead them. That's one reason we integrated these tutors to more linkage to our university, to get more linkage to us lecturer. Perhaps Dr. Gerwald has to add something. My colleagues are here, Dagmar and Gerwald.
Do you wish to add something to it?
From my side, it's okay. If you have questions or want to focus a little bit more on one of the aspects, feel fine to do. But in principle, that's our experience. Yeah, there are people that take the program not knowing what they just signed into, and if you do it very early, it's also fair for them that they get to know, oh, it's maybe not my field really, and so we also kind of produce some dropouts, what we're not so well, that's not the bad thing, right? No. If they recognize it early.
Yeah, and I think it's sorry, but it's just following up what you said, because my second question, and I didn't write it here, is precisely the dropout. 10% is actually quite low, I would say, because first it depends on how you count dropout. It's from the university or it is from the program, right? It's two different things in my perspective. But also because they might actually, the program might not actually be what they expected to, and then they don't fit in. And the sooner the later, and that's why we see here the dropout rate is quite high, or it's higher in the first year in comparison with the following up years, and it's around 20% or even less than that, depends on the programs. And might not to do anything to do, it might not have anything to do with the PBL, for example. It's the student's individuality. Yeah.
Yes, I would like to precise that this dropout rate I spoke about is really the dropout rate of the module PIB. So it's not the dropout rate of the program, and we didn't look at the numbers of students falling out of the program, and it would be quite nice to have these data too, and we tried to get it, but we didn't manage last year. So that's it's important point, I think, to compare.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
To discuss with students and elevated terms to get the reasons for this dropout.
And just to follow up, some years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, we had a course that has a high dropout rate comparison to other courses. It was very, very high. We had it's an interdisciplinary course, it's media technology. And immediately on the first year, easily 30–40% of the students would drop out. And I was teaching in that course, and they would just, by the end of the first semester or second semester, they would say, well, I'm going to physiotherapy. So it was something so different, really different from what they were in. So that was confusing. And we actually look also how the recruitment was done. And it was a lot of how the program was presented to students. So they and this is a little bit funny because they thought they would come to make video games, but it was much more than this. They had programming, they had design, yes, but they also had programming. So it was an engineering degree. So suddenly they were like in shock because it was just not doing video games or doing apps as they thought it were. So the discourse for recruitment actually changed as well. So things kind of stabilized afterwards. So the before could also have an impact somehow. That's my point.
Yes, thank you. I agree completely. And last year, for example, we started new videos on our program biotechnology just to inform the further students better, in order to, yes, they can choose really on a basis of information. And especially biotechnology seems to be something like biology, but in reality it's more technology. It's really an engineering program, and most people do not realize at that point.
Yes, it is true. Indeed, now that we are here, it's more important that we also conduct a course evaluation from students' perspective to understand why is it that they came here? What is it that they found so challenging or advantageous? And if they're dropping out, why are they dropping out? I guess all these perspectives from student side will help us in our course evaluation, not just student learning evaluation. Just to bring my perspectives here, back in my context, we have a first year engineering course, which is multidisciplinary in nature. And at the end of every semester, we have a focus group discussion to understand from students' perspective, what worked, what didn't work. If they had a thought of dropping out, why do they want to drop out? So all these things probably will help us understand the perspectives from student side. In fact, these the focus group discussions have helped us mature our course over the past 5 years. So probably if there's something which could be of use to you, you could think of it.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, yes, thank you. I have, yes, are there any questions from, we also have with us Magdalena and Parisa. I guess Magdalena joined us right now, but Parisa has been here for quite some time. Do you have any questions? If yes, please go ahead.
I was just listening. Thank you so much for the discussion. I had some problem with the camera. I made it try if I, yes. Hello, everyone. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello also. But
thank you.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm not in the engineering field, but I can imagine that how could be some differences, for example, with the field as well. So I was thinking a little bit with the ideas how I can implement it in the background that I have, like it's a medical school and the health sciences thing, basically. So.
All right. Thank you so much for joining in and giving us your reflections. I have two questions before we come to the end of this. The first one is, I understand that for any PBL project or problem, it begins with the problem at hand. Now for Bettina, can you tell us how you identified these problems? Did students spot the problems, or did the faculty members give them a set of problems to choose from? Because as you know, problem spotting and problem solving are two different competencies.
Yes, thank you for your interesting question. In the beginning, we discussed just this question: will we go and give a paper to the students just to work on a defined case, or will we leave and decide the students on which they will work? And because we have just one term and they should go into the labs, so we decided for the first possibility. And so we gave a case to the students, and they have to crystallize the real questions out of this case and then to establish a work plan. It's mainly due to the short time we have in the first term.
Yes. I understand your concern because this is exactly what we do. We kind of fix their context and then allow them to explore in that context.
Yes.
And yes, that's from my side. So, Michael, are we doing good on time?
Yes.
All right. Yes, thank you. So now that we have come to the end of the plenum discussion and we have no other presentations remaining, I'd like to thank the participants for making these webinars very interactive. We've had rich discussions amongst us, and I hope the questions that we posed here open up new avenues for your research. Because in my previous conferences, I've realized that the questions the audience asks, the critique that they give me, plant the seed for my next research. So with this, we come to the end of our webinar today. Thank you very much. In this session, we have seen two papers. One was on empowering women in the construction workforce, and the other one was about PBL in a biotech course. So thank you to all the participants and the presenters for their enriching discussions. And I hope that you have a good weekend ahead and have a good evening. Thank you, Michael. If you have any more questions, you can please email us at IRSPBL email ID. We are happy to respond to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
For your moderation.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.